This female protagonist is truly remarkable. She possesses the ability to foresee the future in her dreams. No matter how terrible the outcome of the dream, it can never be changed in reality. Hong Joo was also ordered to interview Lee Yoo-byum. Lee Yoo-byum stated that given the current evidence, Jae Chan had no chance of winning. The case of the repairman could either not be appealed, or, if appealed, would result in acquittal. Regardless of the outcome, the public would not let the male lead off the hook, implying that this time he and the male lead were on the same side. Jae Chan, feeling the case was tricky, deliberately called everyone to watch him investigate. The woman wondered if it was the police uniform that was too handsome, or just such characters in the police that were too handsome. Facing the person convincing the repairman to surrender, a colleague worried what if he also convinced the male lead. They retrieved surveillance footage from all elevators and staircases in the apartment before and after the incident, which only captured the repairman alone. Han Woo-tak admitted that he had also mistaken his classmate as the murderer because accidental death was also a possibility. She died of traumatic cerebral hemorrhage due to her head hitting the table, an unfortunate accident. But how to explain the blood painting? If the female archer had drawn it, there would be blood traces on her hands and feet. But the examination results showed her hands and feet were clean. The repairman's hands and feet also showed no traces of blood. The male lead believed the repairman could only be cleared of suspicion if he proved that he didn't draw the blood painting. Han Woo-tak thought it should be up to the prosecution to prove that the repairman was the one who drew it to confirm his suspicion. The director believed it was definitely drawn with some unidentified tool, but couldn't specify what exactly. Han Woo-tak believed that it should be clearly described in the indictment what that object was. Otherwise, it would be impossible to determine the factual basis of the prosecution. The protagonist questioned why he would run away if he was innocent. If he was innocent, he should not have fled but stayed to explain himself clearly. Han Woo-tak explained that his classmate felt that even if he was innocent, there was still a possibility of being jailed. The repairman tried to trust the law, hence he surrendered himself. Just now, during the visitation, his classmate even asked if they were searching for the real culprit. If his classmate wanted to escape the charges, he wouldn't ask him to find the truth, but rather to fabricate an alibi for him. The protagonist believed that the repairman had a motive for murder since the female archer often gave him poor reviews and even asked him to take out the trash, which might have led the repairman to kill her in anger. Han Woo-tak countered by asking why the repairman would take out the trash after killing her. If he had killed her, he should have just left the trash at home instead of disposing of it. The repairman only stayed in the community for 13 minutes. In such a short time, committing murder, creating a drawing, and erasing footprints and bloodstains would be impossible. Thus, the protagonist submitted an application to release the repairman from custody. On the other hand, Lee Yoo-byum believed that a case could only be prosecuted if it was filled with evidence. The repairman's father was a drug offender, and the repairman had a history of violence and theft during his student days. Lee Yoo-byum wanted Hong Joo to make this information public. This way, the evidence would naturally accumulate. Just by releasing the repairman's personal information, hundreds of investigators would dig into his past, and a massive online manhunt would ensue. People would then support the prosecutor in demanding a prosecution. Knowing that Lee Yoo-byum intended to manipulate public opinion rather than just following legal principles, the protagonist realized he absolutely could not prosecute without manipulating public opinion himself. Nam Hong Joo was deep in thought, remembering how her uncle, unable to bear his brother's murder charge, chose to drown himself because it was her uncle's brother who killed her father. Little Hong Joo wished her uncle would go to hell to meet his brother. Was it right to hate him and not save him when she saw him dying? Little Jae Chan decided to jump into the water to save the uncle, urging little Hong Joo to help pull them both up if she didn't want to regret it later. Jung Jae Chan also told Hong Joo that assuming the repairman was not the murderer made everything else make sense. The female archer often fainted due to vertigo, which is why she retired early. Therefore, it was after the repairman left that the female archer, due to her vertigo, fainted and died. This would explain the autopsy results, why the repairman was taking out the trash, and why there were no bloodstains on his clothes. The hardest part to explain was the blood drawing on the floor. The protagonist didn't know who drew it, but he was sure it wasn't the repairman. Since they couldn't find the object used for the drawing, the repairman was unfortunately implicated. Thus, no matter what, the protagonist wanted to prosecute the repairman, but he couldn't distort the facts to do so. Otherwise, it would ruin a man's life. Personal feelings are trivial in the face of someone's life, so he could only disappoint Hong Joo. His words moved Hong Joo, who made a ring out of a metal wire and gave it to Jae Chan because she felt he would need it. Eventually, Hong Joo did not report the repairman's details for performance reasons, just like Jung Jae Chan chose to rescue the uncle. Little Hong Joo, unable to get past her conscience, also chose to save both. Lee Jong, upon hearing that the repairman was released, furiously thought Jung Jae Chan was insane. He planned to create a report and invite the media for interviews. He intended to personally invite reporters. Meanwhile, Hong Joo's dream changed to a vision of Jung Jae Chan being stabbed by a man in a black hat while crossing the street, and Lee Jong started gathering journalists to expose the story about the female archer's father, who had terminal pancreatic cancer. Upon hearing the news of the repairman's release, she suddenly fainted and was hospitalized. There are many homicides without signs of resistance called surprise attacks, where the victim is attacked suddenly and does not show signs of resistance. Which scenario is harder to understand? Is it drawing a picture on the ground with blood within 13 minutes, or blood spontaneously flowing and forming a picture in an empty place? In the middle of the night, Hong Joo went to the male protagonist's room, but after searching for a while, all she found were Jae Chan's black suits. Facing a confused Jae Chan, Hong Joo broke down crying. In her dreams, the male protagonist was severely injured while wearing a black suit. Hong Joo urged Jae Chan not to wear it, and definitely not to cross the pedestrian crosswalk, suggesting that it might be better if they didn't meet at all. However, Jae Chan insisted that Hong Joo describe her dream in detail, starting from the cause to thoroughly investigate and possibly prevent it. In her dream, Hong Joo could see a light burning behind him. Jae Chan stood among the crowd, approached by a man in black clothing. Everyone looked at Jung Jae Chan as if his end was near. Hong Joo couldn't see the man's face, but was certain he was related to the repairman because her dream changed after the repairman was released. Meanwhile, the news also reported the release of the only suspect. The repairman had a past involving violence and theft, and Lee Jong suggested that he might commit other crimes or there might be other victims for which the prosecution should be responsible. Han Woo-tak explained that their classmate had only stolen an autographed paper from a rice cake shop to put it in his mother's seaweed rice roll shop. The rice cake shop owner caused a scene at his mother's shop, and the classmate was also charged with violence in stopping him. Moreover, the case was already 10 years old. The repairman was also shunned and avoided by those around him. It was said that many protesters gathered in front of the Hangang District Prosecutor's office. Hong Joo informed Jae Chan to enter through the back door. Jae Chan, acting confidently, stated that whether it was a verbal fight or a physical one, he was fully confident and told her not to worry. However, he then realized he couldn't climb over the fence. Lee Yu-beom told the chief that Han Woo-tak and Jae Chan had an unusual relationship, being the repairman's roommate. If the reporters and the relatives knew about this, what would be the consequences? He pressured the chief to persuade the male protagonist to prosecute, or else he would leak the information about Han Woo-tak to the reporters. On Han Woo-tak's side, he also realized that his classmate's attire resembled the person in Hong Joo's dreams. The repairman complained that being released was useless as they still treated him as a murderer. Hong Joo, seeing Jae Chan leaving in a black suit, couldn't help but yell at him to change his clothes. However, wearing his brother's clothes would result in a scolding from the minister. At that moment, both noticed the lanterns on the street, which were the ones Hong Joo saw in her dream. Jae Chan, because he changed his clothes, fortunately avoided being surrounded by the public. His colleagues, seeing Prosecutor Ding's refreshing and pleasant attire, felt relieved and found him adorable. Meanwhile, the online criticism of the prosecution's incompetence had already received hundreds of thousands of likes. Hong Joo tried to regain some dignity for Jae Chan, but ended up facing even more fierce criticism from netizens. However, she discovered a photo in the comments that instantly resolved the mystery of the blood painting. On the other side, the female archer's mother was giving a statement, accidentally mentioning that the female archer used a robotic vacuum to clean, if it's a robotic vacuum. The mystery of the blood painting that has troubled them all along is explained. The female archer fainted due to vertigo, bled excessively from a head injury, and died. Then the robotic vacuum used the blood on the floor to create the pattern. They had overlooked the scenario where the robotic vacuum fell out. After asking the property manager, they learned the vacuum was red, but it had long been thrown away by children. Seeing the mountainous garbage dump, the team leader was on the verge of cursing, especially since he was wearing new leather shoes today. On the other side, Hong Joo, along with Han Woo-tak and the heavy-set police officer, were searching. Seeing her endlessly explaining the cause and effect, Jae Chan was moved and immediately went up to hug her. The heavy-set police officer felt that they should not show partiality, needing a hug himself to avoid feeling sad and left out. The senior reporter, who had previously written inaccurate reports, even found 3 people on his own. After analyzing the bloodstains among 6 robotic vacuums, the test results confirmed that the bloodstains were indeed from the female archer. Now Hong Joo could write a new report. Han Woo-tak also told Hong Joo that the man in her dream attacking Jae Chan looked like a classmate he had recently seen wearing a black fisherman's hat. Now the dream wouldn't come true. He asked Hong Joo to interview the classmate when writing the report, as he had been criticized too much lately. Senior Shin believed that even without a suspect, they should prosecute the repairman. If they didn't, the reporters would only write about the investigation being baseless. Indeed, as Senior Shin said, no matter which media outlet, they would not properly report on the repairman's case. The public opinion would then never change. The protesting crowd would continue to protest and insult, and even all the cases taken over by the male lead in the future would be called baseless investigations. Prosecuting the repairman would certainly result in his acquittal, and then those who criticized the prosecutor would go on to criticize the judges who acquitted him. The prosecutor would thus avoid drawing fire and conclude the matter. Recalling the time they saved the uncle who was intent on dying, Hong Joo persuaded him to live on. Before leaving, she left a note to little Jae Chan which said, "My father once said, now Jae Chan had decided, since there was no suspect, not to prosecute. It was obvious, and he believed that among the reporters, there were fools like him." In the end, Hong Joo honestly interviewed the repairman, letting him say whatever he wanted. The repairman, facing the camera, struggled painfully to speak. The prosecutor declared no charges, which was hardest for the bereaved to accept. Listening to reporter Nam's report, Jung Jae Chan suddenly realized that Nam Hong Joo was the little chestnut from back then. Anger was natural, but it was also painful. The person who had once saved him was Nam Hong Joo. He asked his mother if Nam Hong Joo's nickname was Little Chestnut. "My God, how did you know?" Lee Yoo-byum planned to drop a bombshell about the relationship between Han Woo-tak and Jung Jae Chan with the repairman. Learning of this, the female archer's father was furious. That evening, the male lead came to buy a ring, and when asked what size ring his girlfriend wore, he realized that Hong Joo had already dreamed of this scene. After receiving an invitation from Jae Chan, Hong Joo asked Han Woo-tak and learned that Han Woo-tak was drinking with the repairman, and the classmate had also given up on the idea of killing the police and the prosecutor. She learned that she didn't have to worry about that dream anymore. Hong Joo bravely went on a date, but this changed the future. Just like blocking flowing water only causes it to flow elsewhere, because you prevented what was originally going to happen, time flows in a different direction. Whether it flows towards something better or worse is uncertain. The father of the deceased pursued the repairman, but fortunately, Han Woo-tak and a classmate skillfully avoided the collision. As the father attempted to rush again, he was surrounded by the police who had just arrived, and at that moment, he also fainted from exhaustion. On the other side, the male lead was bleeding heavily and could have his heart stop at any moment. If Jae Chan died, Hong Joo would be incredibly heartbroken. She had always blamed herself for not being able to bear the burden, and this time, she would continuously blame herself because of the male lead. "I said some harsh words. I wish he had just kept the umbrella back then and said nothing." Hong Joo changed the future, but it became worse. If something good happens to Jae Chan, she wouldn't know what to do. If something like what happened to her father occurred, she couldn't bear to think about it. 4 hours passed and the surgery wasn't over, until Han Woo-tak came to inform her that the surgery was over and Jae Chan was all right. Unable to hold on any longer, Hong Joo still fainted. When Hong Joo woke up, Jae Chan was still in the ICU. Her younger brother Sung Won asked her to pass a ring to Hong Joo. The male lead had arranged to meet her to give her this ring. The mother was curious how prosecutor Jung knew that her daughter's nickname was Little Chestnut. When Hong Joo saw the note she wrote 13 years ago, she understood the situation. The male lead had always missed her. The female lead worried he might never wake up. Jae Chan never dreamed that Little Chestnut was a girl. Prosecutor Shen arranged a confrontation investigation with Lee Yoo-byom and Han Woo-tak. These photos were sent to the female archer's father by Lee Yoo-byom, leading the father to mistakenly shoot Jung Jae Chan. Lee Yoo-byom corrected that it wasn't a mistake but a suspicion. His beloved daughter had suddenly died, and after her death, the prosecutor did nothing. However, they found evidence that the robotic vacuum cleaner had the female archer's blood. Lee Yoo-byom rebutted that it could be forged. It's easy to forge blood test documents if the prosecutor and the search team collude. Can prosecutors fabricate evidence so easily? Prosecutor Shen couldn't even think of such a thing. He retorted, asking if Lee Yoo-byom hadn't often done such things when he was a prosecutor. Would Jung Jae Chan fabricate evidence like Lee Yoo-byom did when he was a prosecutor? Lee Yoo-byom countered, "Did I fire the gun? Assist? Incite? What crime have I committed? Why am I being summoned if I'm legally innocent?" Lee Yoo-byom turned out to be so terrifying. Although it was the deceased's father who fired the gun, the crime seemed to have been committed by Lee Yoo-byom. When Jae Chan saw Hong Joo come to the hospital, he hugged her and said he missed her very much. The supervisor, seeing this, was moved by Jae Chan's affection. Turning around and seeing Hong Joo, he was stunned. Jae Chan, seeing Hong Joo, was completely baffled. Sang-mi, however, misunderstood and thought Jung Jae Chan liked her. Holding Jae Chan, she hurriedly said she didn't know he was waiting for her. This looked like a misunderstanding. Hong Joo made a bold statement. "Today's misunderstanding is due to a lack of understanding between Jung Jae Chan and me, which led Sang-mi to fantasize. We will strive to be more understanding. Please rest assured, Sang-mi, and also let go of your hand." Sang-mi still wanted to argue. She was incredibly beautiful and even enchanting, completely shattering Sang-mi's illusions. Seeing that Hong Joo wasn't wearing a ring, Jae Chan inquired about the note she wrote inside, but Hong Joo claimed she couldn't remember as it was from long ago. Regarding her previous visit to the ICU, Hong Joo believed he had seen a hallucination. Throughout the day, Jae Chan doubted life itself, remembering every minute and second of that day. It seemed meaningless to Hong Joo. Confused, Jae Chan asked Hong Joo again, "Why avoid it? Why pretend to forget?" How could Hong Joo forget? It was the saddest day of their lives that they had spent together, and also the day she most wanted to forget, because that day, she almost killed Jae Chan. She was very angry at that uncle, feeling it wouldn't matter if she died along with him. To her, it was hell. Even now, her hands tremble when she remembers. Hong Joo had lost someone she deeply loved. Perhaps the emptiness was too great to bear, so she filled it with anger, leaving regret like a scar. To Hong Joo, the Jung Jae Chan from 13 years ago was both a wound and a scar. She thought by pretending not to know and hiding it, it would be fine. The enlightened Jung Jae Chan visited the archer's father, understanding why the father was so angry. He didn't want the father to misunderstand his kind daughter. She wasn't someone who would provoke hatred. Senior Shen asked why his attitude suddenly changed. Previously, he was set to reason and interrogate. Suddenly, Jung Jae Chan wanted to see Hong Joo, and Hong Joo, carrying an umbrella, found him immediately. Jung Jae Chan didn't expect Hong Joo to visit him as well. She had seen in her dream. It was raining. Jae Chan didn't know where she was, wandering cluelessly, soaking wet. His wound worsened. He had a fever, but foolishly searched for her, found her, but he was nearly dead. Hurried to tell her that he had also hesitated back then. For a moment he hesitated. Maybe not save the uncle, because he was as angry as Hong Joo at that time. He urged Hong Joo not to run away anymore, not to be like dog shit, impossible to find when needed. Meanwhile, a famous professor-author found Lee Yoo-byom at the professor's book launch. His student prepared a surprise revealing his true character, nearly broke his knees, moving house, picking up his son from school. The professor's tyranny wasn't finished when the young man was dragged away. The young man came to assist, not to be enslaved by the professor. The professor choked the assistant, causing him to suffocate, then threw the assistant into the elevator shaft. A 4-year-old boy was the witness. The professor only found the boy's hat. The assistant suffered brain damage and became brain dead. It's hard to say he's still alive, so is that the setting? You mean he's in a brain dead state? Lee Jong, using legal terms, claimed he's not a murderer, because in criminal law, brain death is not recognized as death. They only recognize cardiac death. The professor could potentially be acquitted. Jung Jae Chan was discharged but found Hong Joo didn't wear the ring he gave. Treated the same as Han Woo-tak. Hong Joo also lets the male lead recuperate at her home. She has experience. Definitely more capable than inexperienced Seung Won. Hong Joo went to tidy up the room, but no matter how, she couldn't find the ring he gave. Jae Chan walked in and asked if she disliked the ring he gave her. Hong Joo lied, saying she had to watch her colleagues' expressions at work and her mother's expressions at home, and that she would wear it when it was just the two of them. She also thoughtfully took his temperature. Learning that Hong Joo had also taken Han Woo-tak's temperature and changed his medicine, Jae Chan became instantly displeased but wouldn't admit it. After Hong Joo left, Jae Chan imagined her caring for Han Woo-tak and felt a tingling sensation. Hong Joo asked her mother if she had seen the ring, the one Jae Chan had given her. Her mother denied seeing it and asked if she had lost it. When her mother learned that Jung Jae Chan was the little boy she met 13 years ago, she hoped their relationship would not deepen further. The teaching assistant's father learned that his son had indeed registered for organ donation at the headquarters. He planned to donate his son's organs the day after tomorrow, on his son's birthday. Learning about a brain-dead donor, the prosecutor's son should be able to receive a transplant. She was very grateful. Han Woo-tak dreamed that the professor was acquitted because there was no household registration, so the professor couldn't be arrested. Jung Jae Chan resigned because of this, unsure of what to do. Hong Joo also dreamed that Jung Jae Chan, in his quest to catch someone, had caused the deaths of 7 people. Is this what is considered justice? Jung Jae Chan resigned because of this. Han Woo-tak immediately went to find Hong Joo, who was also listless. She was troubled about how to tell Jae Chan about her nightmare. Learning that Han Woo-tak's dream also involved Jae Chan resigning from his prosecutor position, Jae Chan also noticed the strange duo. Han Woo-tak hoped he could escape, while Hong Joo did not want to tell him but would help him escape. So she pulled Jae Chan to skip work with her today, and they spent a pleasant day together. Hong Joo even wanted to invite him to go to the beach tomorrow, to skip work just like today. But Jae Chan asked what would happen tomorrow. He had heard her and Han Woo-tak's words. Hadn't they seen it in their dreams? What exactly did they dream that made them want him to escape? Hong Joo had no choice but to explain. He would have to make a very difficult choice. According to Hong Joo's dream, he would go to perform an autopsy tomorrow upon returning to work. After the autopsy, it would be discovered that it was not an accident, but a murder. Although they caught the criminal, he was an organ donor. Because of the household registration, he couldn't undergo organ transplantation. The 7 people waiting for transplants would die, and this blow would lead Jae Chan to resign. According to Han Woo-tak's dream, if he didn't perform the autopsy, he would choose to save those 7 people, but the professor would be released. The victim's father would be very resentful, and Jae Chan would resign regardless of his choice. Jae Chan decided to go to the beach tomorrow, choosing to escape, even though it was cowardly. Whether he took responsibility or not was irrelevant to him. Lee Jong also helped the professor analyze the situation and advised the professor to find the owner of the hat, which was his biggest concern. The two planning to go to the beach tomorrow were stopped by the brother Seung Won. It had been 2 days, and the aunt had sent all his luggage back. Hong Joo felt her mother was too heartless, making such a clear separation. The ring was also hidden by her mother. She couldn't bear to see Hong Joo collapse again. The next day, Jae Chan would go to the beach. It was unreasonable for all the suffering to be concentrated on him. It made more sense for the colleagues to share the pain. Suddenly, Hong Joo decided to let him return to work. The path is made by walking. If we can't handle it, we'll escape to the sea together. Hong Joo reminded Jae Chan to be mentally prepared. Meanwhile, after days of investigation, the professor found the eyewitness, a little boy who was so scared that he wet his pants and ran away crying. Just as the professor was about to catch him, Han Woo-tak and the chubby police officer arrived just in time. Senior son also hurried to the hospital because his son might receive a kidney transplant, paying no attention to Jung Jae Chan, who had just returned to his job, creating an awkward situation where it seemed like no one was really worried about him. The organ donor was indeed the brain-dead teaching assistant. Upon returning, Jung Jae Chan indeed received the household registration information. After the autopsy, organ donation would proceed immediately. Han Woo-tak also called. He seemed to have caught the criminal of the case and might have found the eyewitness. Lee Yoo-byum instructed the professor that once the organ transplant was completed, no autopsy could be performed. He was to go to the police station first and request a lawyer, saying nothing else, as the rest would be handled by him. Jung Jae Chan refused to approve the organ removal, insisting on a household inspection, which meant the operation for senior son's son could not proceed. Lee Yoo-byum arrived at the hospital and learned that an autopsy could not be conducted, and the prosecutor in charge was his arch-enemy, creating a situation of enemies on a narrow road. Lee Yoo-byum planned to challenge in court. It seems that if they conducted an autopsy, the organ transplant couldn't happen, and if they didn't perform the autopsy, they would miss catching the criminal. If the household inspection ruled it an accidental death, 7 people would die needlessly. Senior Lee believed that compared to the lives of 7 people, Jung Jae Chan would prefer to enhance his own performance. Now, with such evidence at hand, what weighs more, the evidence or the lives of 7 people? Senior Shen also agreed that the decision to forgo organ transplant for a household inspection was too risky. After a struggle, Senior Son thought that a household inspection should be carried out. It wasn't that she was crazy, but rather, she was making the choice as a parent. If she were the parent of the teaching assistant, rather than saving someone else's child, she would also want to understand how her own son died. Whether it was 7 people or 70, compared to saving others, she would definitely want to clarify her son's wrongful death first. This is the heart of a parent, not as a prosecutor, but as a parent. Which side would Jung Jae Chan choose? To save 7 lives or to catch 1 criminal? If you were me, which side would you choose? The male lead asked the minister if organ transplant and household inspection could be conducted simultaneously. Although rare, there were still such cases. The 2008 Busan overpass murder case, the 2014 Pyeongchang ski resort case, both involved simultaneous organ transplant and household inspection, successfully obtaining a verdict for manslaughter. The commonality was that the victims of the cases were not injured in organs but had head injuries. As long as a household inspection of the head and neck is conducted, the cause of death should be determined. If it were me, after making the decision, Jung Jae Chan squatted in the bushes, pulling at his own hair, his mouth only good at talking, not considering physical and mental fatigue, boasting about how to bear the consequences. Hong Joo called, curious about what decision he had made. Jae Chan pretended to be calm because he had chosen the most difficult option with confidence. Hong Joo didn't believe him. Jae Chan thought she dreamt of him squatting in a corner pulling his hair, but this time Hong Joo was following the sound of the bell. Jae Chan felt like he had just learned to walk and was about to go into battle tomorrow. However, Hong Joo said she had a dream. The organ transplant was successful, and the criminal was brought to justice. Once the case was over, they planned to go see the ocean. With her dream as support, Jae Chan was instantly filled with confidence. But Hong Joo hadn't actually dreamt it. She lied just to encourage him. In the end, the organ transplant and household inspection were carried out simultaneously. Han Woo-tak had not foreseen this trial in his dreams. Hong Joo only lied because Jae Chan looked like a deflated ball, and she was afraid he would get angry. Han Woo-tak believed that a lie told to the end is no longer a lie. When Hong Joo asked if Han Woo-tak had ever told such a lie, he flatly denied it. The professor worried whether they could truly be acquitted. Lee Yoo-byum explained that if charged with manslaughter, it would be hard to prove innocence. But fortunately, the prosecutor charged him with murder, which paradoxically made it easier to achieve a not guilty verdict. A colleague also realized this issue, and to be safe, the minister wanted to amend the indictment to reflect either death by assault or violence resulting in death. However, Jae Chan insisted that it was murder. Bolstered by Hong Joo's dream, he stood firm for once. This was exactly what Hong Joo was worried about. As Hong Joo got out of the car, her red power bank fell under the seat. Han Woo-tak promised to find it and return it to her. He told Hong Joo not to worry too much about Jae Chan. Jae Chan was more reliable and cautious than she imagined. In court, Jae Chan presented that the defendant had habitually assigned the victim and other teaching assistants personal tasks such as tutoring children, washing cars, and moving houses. He often used dissatisfaction with their work attitude as a pretext for violence. The victim exposed the defendant's improper violent behavior, which led the defendant, harboring resentment, to strangle the victim, causing asphyxiation. Lee Ubiom countered that it was self-defense. Upon discovering that the other party was heavily intoxicated and unable to communicate verbally, the defendant left the scene. Jae Chan insisted that the defendant pushed the victim down the elevator shaft. Lee Ubiom argued that the victim, unable to contain his anger, kicked the elevator door and accidentally fell into the elevator shaft, leading to death. The defendant had no motive for murder nor direct evidence of murder. Therefore, Lee Ubiom denied the prosecution's claims. The case ultimately hinged on a 5-year-old child, the sole eyewitness. The child had previously recounted the incident at the police station. It was Han Woo-tak who, by adapting to the child's level of understanding and attempting emotional communication, obtained the child's statement. Jae Chan asked Han Woo-tak to teach him. After dinner, everyone went back to work. While Hong Joo was looking for a sewing kit to fix a button, she discovered a ring hidden by her mother. Jae Chan realized he had left his phone at home. When he went back to retrieve it, he overheard a conversation between Hong Joo and her mother. It turned out her mother opposed her relationship with Jae Chan. The last time Jung Jae Chan collapsed, Hong Joo cried, fearing he would end up like her father. Her tearful breakdown at that moment, and the death of her father and Jae Chan's injury, had left Hong Joo steeped in self-blame. In the future, she would continue to blame herself, suffer, break down, and get hurt again. Therefore, her mother feared her daughter's relationship with Jae Chan. Hong Joo expressed that she was happy and fortunate because of him, and pleaded with her mother to like him and cherish him as she loved her daughter. At the next court session, Jae Chan questioned the events of the incident. The child was indeed too scared to repeat the story. Lee Ubiom, however, promised the child that he could go home immediately, as long as he revealed which bus route he had taken. The child answered Route 6, but his mother explained it was Route 434. A single question turned the child into a liar. He was the only witness, and without his testimony, they would lose the case. Jae Chan had to quickly switch to a dazed, cute face, pretending to be a friend of Santa Claus to communicate with the child. The child finally started communicating with him. The facts matched the recording exactly. Mom moved the chair upstairs, instructing them to always eat at their own home. It seemed that Mom still didn't accept her interactions with Jae Chan. Due to a kidney transplant, Senior Son's son could now urinate normally. There were many people they needed to repay. The son urged her to quickly go and express their gratitude. Lee Ubiom raised objections to the household inspection report. He intended to make an issue out of the organ transplant and household inspection. Senior Son personally stepped in to validate the accuracy of the household inspection, blocking every potential argument Lee Ubiom could think of without leaving any loopholes. Just as they were about to succeed, Lee Ubiom seized on the most decisive point. Legally, brain death is not considered death. Only cardiac death counts as death. If the victim suffered brain death from a head injury and sometime later cardiac death occurred, the death could be attributed to the defendant. However, if the victim was brain dead and the heart stopped only after the transplant surgery, then it was not the defendant's actions, but the doctors that caused the heart to stop. Thus, from a legal perspective, the victim did not die due to the defendant's actions, but because of the organ transplant. Lee Ubiom argued that the defendant could not be held responsible for the victim's death, and he claimed that the defendant was not guilty of murder. Hong Joo, burning with anger, helped the elderly man leave the scene. She believed if that person had not beaten the victim, her uncle's son would still be alive and well, and the doctors would not have needed to perform surgery. The elderly man struggled to accept this reality. Does conducting an organ transplant really make a criminal innocent? He regretted ever agreeing to the transplant, falling into deep self-blame. Jae Chan argued that because the elderly man agreed to the organ transplant, they could not convict the murderer of his son. What was supposed to be a good deed turned into a huge mistake. The law seemed to be an accomplice to the wicked, but it definitely should not be so. The victim fell into brain death due to the defendant's actions. Even without the transplant, he would have soon died from cardiac arrest. Just because a transplant was performed during this process, does this make the defendant innocent? Even if there was no transplant, the professor's son would have died. But if the moment the professor hit him was removed, there wouldn't have been a death at all. It was very clear who should be held accountable for causing death. If you remove the surgeon from the process of causing death, the victim would still have died. But if you remove the defendant, the victim would not have died. It was not the organ transplant, but the professor who killed the son. The law must not confuse this point. Merely determining the time of death as the moment the heart stops beating and considering the defendant innocent is clearly not a fair judgment. Moreover, the decision that brought new life to 7 people should not favor the defendant because that too is not justice. Ultimately, the professor was sentenced to 7 years in prison. After the trial, Jung Jae Chan thanked senior son, who was even more grateful to Jae Chan because he could now sleep peacefully. Lee Yoo-beom, furious, stormed out of the restroom, leaving behind a green umbrella. After watching Jae Chan's trial, Hong Joo realized that she had been confused before. She had always believed that her father died because of her, and that Jae Chan was shot because of her. So she had been in deep pain. It was only after attending that trial that she understood. Her father died because he was a deserter, and Jae Chan was shot because of the female shooter's father. Even if she hadn't been there at the time, the events would still have occurred. The wrongdoing was committed by someone else, but she had misunderstood for a long time. Therefore, now she no longer blames herself. During this time, her mother apologized to Jae Chan for being petty, hurting another's child because of her love for her own child, which was truly shameful for an elder. Her mother no longer obstructed their relationship, and the two of them eventually went to see the ocean, which was exactly like the sea Hong Joo had seen in her dreams. Jae Chan also pointed out that Hong Joo was lying because she had never had that dream. It was obvious to him that she was lying because she kept insisting that he not take things lightly, and even came to watch the trial, which was practically written on her face as, "I am lying." But he thought she might want to see the ocean, so they went. A news report stated that the serial killer involved in the saline solution murders, a 52-year-old named Myung, was sentenced to life imprisonment. Myung, having torn his underwear into strips to make a rope, hanged himself. In the suicide note left behind, Myung wrote that he was wronged and demanded that the truth be uncovered. Myung's son, Myung Dae-gu, handed the note to Seung-won, hoping prosecutor Ding would help clear his father's name. After reading it, Seung-won also felt something was amiss. Even more suspicious was that the prosecutor in charge of the case was Lee Yoo-beom. An older man had stolen many mobile phones. Strangely, the owner of one phone was willing to pay 10 million won to retrieve it and assured that he would not report the theft. Curious about what was worth 10 million won inside the phone, the older man unlocked it. That same year, the police officer also dreamed that Hong Joo and Jae Chan were locked in an iron house and died surrounded by flames. According to that pattern, the older man would also dream about the person who saved his life at a critical moment. Han Woo-tak would mainly dream about Jae Chan, and Jae Chan would mainly dream about Hong Joo. Jae Chan had previously thought it impossible because he had never imagined Hong Joo would be the chestnut girl. When Han Woo-tak narrowly escaped death, he thought he had almost died and was determined to repay the person who saved him. This thought started his dreaming, in which he could foresee the future of his lifesaver. Starting today, Hong Joo would also spend 3 days interviewing at Jae Chan's Criminal Division 3. The director had arranged for her to be shadowed by prosecutor Shin, the most capable and best-looking prosecutor in Division 3. The director had not chosen Jae Chan because he was taking care of him, as he and Hong Joo were currently in a sweet relationship. Letting Hong Joo observe Jae Chan for 3 days would surely shatter her illusions and lead to disappointment. On the other side, the older man had just completed the phone transaction when he was chased by a group of police officers. Han Woo-tak and a chubby police officer also happened to be there. However, Han Woo-tak couldn't distinguish who the police were talking about in gray clothes until the chubby officer hinted at someone wearing plaid pants. Driven by his physical strength, Han Woo-tak caught up with the young man. In a moment of desperation, the young man threw the phone into the river. The older man insisted on speaking to Jae Chan face to face. He talked about his difficult life. His wife had left him, and his only daughter, who had suffered a severe back injury in a traffic accident at age 9, could not even drink water without his care. His daughter was now alone at home, and he pleaded with Jae Chan not to arrest him. However, the director exposed the older man's lies. 10 years ago, the uncle's story hadn't changed at all. He urged Jae Chan not to be fooled and to quickly request an arrest. Instead, Jae Chan wanted to personally verify the situation by visiting the uncle's home. On the other side, Han Woo-tak learned that the chubby police officer had long known about his inability to distinguish colors, yet he had kept it a secret. The chubby police officer felt that compared to his eyesight, it was his beer belly that should get him fired. When Jae Chan actually went to the uncle's house, he found no daughter there. He felt like he was being played by the suspect's lies. However, Hong Joo told him the truth. She had asked an old lady at a cookie shop, who confirmed that the uncle indeed had a daughter. The uncle was arrested for theft by the minister 10 years ago, and his daughter was rescued by someone else while he was at home alone. But she passed away during the time the uncle was in prison. If the uncle had met a prosecutor like the protagonist back then, perhaps his daughter might still be alive. When the uncle learned that Jae Chan had really gone to his house to inquire, and also learned about his daughter's situation, he was grateful. Jae Chan was the first one to go to his house 6 times before. Out of gratitude, the uncle gave him a reward, which was the secret in the mobile phone worth 10 million won. It turned out that the memory card contained photos of the victims of the saline solution murder cases, totaling 19 people, while only 11 were known victims of the saline cases. The remaining 8 likely died after Mr. Myung was captured, suggesting there might be another perpetrator, or at least an accomplice, maybe even the real culprit. The minister, believing that a habitual thief couldn't be trusted, was left speechless when he learned that the uncle's daughter had indeed died 10 years ago. Hong Joo found this place based on the information in the memory card. By this time, someone was frantically approaching. When Hong Joo entered the container, she found Jae Chan was already there, but the informant, a young man, was already dead. Then, someone locked the door from the outside. By the time they realized they couldn't escape, the mysterious person also poured a bucket of gasoline inside. The fire started, and they couldn't even open a window. At the crucial moment, the department head arrived just in time. Those who had been saved would have such dreams, dreaming about the future of their savior. Eventually, the department head broke the lock and rescued the 2 who were near death. The department head reprimanded them for inspecting without following protocols and emphasized that personal safety is most important when going to the scene, especially not knowing who the other party is and why they should not come alone in the middle of the night. Hong Joo didn't tell her mother the details of what happened last night, fearing it would worry her. Jae Chan hoped that no matter how bad things got, or if he had a nightmare, she should always tell him the truth and not lie to him. The person who died in the fire was not the owner of the mobile phone. The arsonist was very likely the phone's owner and possibly the serial killer in the saline solution case. Discovering something amiss with the saline murder case, the minister decided to reinvestigate the saline solution serial murder case. Chief Choi didn't explain why he went to the fire scene, and that location was remote and different from his usual routes. Plus, Chief Choi knew that Hong Joo was going there alone. If he feared offending, not asking would only increase his suspicions. Han Woo-tak suggested that Jae Chan must definitely ask Chief Choi for clarity. Jae Chan knew why Hong Joo and Han Woo-tak suspected Chief Choi. Although he understood rationally, he couldn't accept it emotionally. Senior Shin began checking gas stations, not those who directly filled their tanks, but those who bought gasoline in cans. Nam Hong Joo went to the supermarket to shop. When she saw Myung Dae-gu, the son of the serial killer responsible for the saline drip murders, a wave of terror enveloped Hong Joo. Myung Dae-gu identified himself and asked her if she had anything to say to the murderer's son. The sight of a green umbrella behind him reminded her of the green umbrella from her dream, where she saw herself dying. Myung Dae-gu questioned whether she knew his father had passed away. In response, Jung Jae Chan introduced himself and mentioned that he had reopened the investigation into his father's case to determine if there were any issues or wrongful accusations. He reassured that all evidence would be re-examined and invited any potentially exonerating evidence to be brought forward. Hong Joo was actually terrified by Dae-gu, feeling like he was the one who would kill her. She urged Jae Chan to directly question the chief, as inaction would only deepen suspicions. Meanwhile, Myung Dae-gu came to return a green umbrella to Lee Yoo-byum, only to find Hong Joo interviewing him. She questioned why prosecutors always seem to leak investigation details to the media. Lee Yoo-byum reasoned that it might be due to insufficient evidence or irregularities, which could lead to an acquittal if pursued directly, hence seeking public support through the media. Hong Joo then confronted Lee Yoo-byum about whether he leaked evidence in the Myung case because he had feelings for her. which made him feel guilty and suspicious about why she was bringing up the old case. This was when he learned about the renewed investigation into the Myong case, and Hong Joo told him to contact her if he had anything to say. Daegu turned away to avoid being seen by Hong Joo, who did not notice him. He also returned the green umbrella. Jae Chan discovered that the saline bottles found in Mr. Myong's office had become crucial evidence. Mr. Myong had claimed during the investigation that the prosecution had fabricated them, suggesting that if the prosecutors wanted, they could make it happen. The person in charge of the seizure operation at the time was the chief, raising suspicions that either Lee Yu-byom or the chief might be involved in any forgery. Lee Yu-byom also received a message from the arsonist threatening to confess to forging evidence if caught by the prosecution. Jae Chan confronted the chief to ask how he knew Hong Joo and he were at the location separately, to which the chief vaguely responded that he guessed. Jae Chan questioned how he knew their exact location, and the chief mentioned something akin to a sudden psychic intuition. Regarding the arson case, Hong Joo had some questions for Han Woo-tak, who also returned a red mobile power bank she had left in his car. Hong Joo did not expose Han Woo-tak's color blindness. She noted that the bag containing 10 million won looked like a woman's bag. Senior Shin found out that the person who bought gasoline in a plastic can was a woman. If the arsonist was caught, Lee Yu-byom could lose everything. The woman, who killed nearly 20 people because of Lee Yu-byom's assistance, had not been imprisoned. Reporters discovered that the woman's name was Ha Ju-an, a long-term patient in the ward where the murders took place. The motive behind her killing other patients was her jealousy. Ha Ju-an's intestines and stomach had been removed, and she had not recovered after several years, while others improved. Initially, she was ready to face punishment, but instead, the prosecutor arrested Mr. Myong. That prosecutor was Lee Yu-byom, the person who had given her hope. Colleagues also found Ha Ju-an's anonymous phone, and her credit and transit cards were completely unused after the arson case. Lee Yu-byom couldn't stand hearing this, wondering since when he had become the hope of such a despicable person. Lee Yu-byom must find a way. He plans to take advantage of the power outage tomorrow night. He informs Ha Ju-an, and also tells her that another person who knows about the forged evidence is Nam Hong Joo. He arranges for Hong Joo to come to his office for an interview at 8 p.m. Before leaving, Hong Joo specifically asks if it will rain today. Her colleague mentions that there is only a 5% chance of precipitation. Jae Chan also learns that the department head had once worked at the same police station as his father. It's possible that the department head was the uncle he was searching for. However, by the time he reaches out, the department head has already resigned. The message he leaves behind asserts he did not forge any evidence and advises Jae Chan to handle the case objectively and rigorously without considering anyone else. Jae Chan decides to temporarily set aside the matter of the department head's resignation. That evening, Lee Yu-byom adds hallucinogenic drugs to the coffee, unbeknownst to Hong Joo, who arrives for the interview and drinks the coffee. Even though she's offered an exclusive story, she can't promise Lee Yu-byom anything. Suddenly, it starts raining. Ha Ju-an also rushes to the building from downstairs. Jae Chan dreams of this terrifying scenario. As the heavy rain falls, Hong Joo's phone goes unanswered. Jae Chan tells Han Woo-tak about his dream where Hong Joo is kidnapped. The dream is set 15 minutes from now, at the rooftop of Hagwang Law Firm. At this moment, Lee Yu-byom is already on the rooftop holding Hong Joo under a green umbrella. Ha Ju-an is ready with an injection, which will paralyze all muscles in the body within 5 minutes, leading gradually to death due to inability to breathe. Hong Joo only asks what time it is and where she is. Ha Ju-an thinks she wants to know the time and place of her death, so she tells her everything. Lee Yu-byom then takes out the hallucinogenic drug and consumes one himself. Han Woo-tak and others arrive at the building at this time, unable to use the elevator due to the power outage. But fortunately, there is a backup elevator. Lee Yu-byom looks terrified. He wants to kill Ha Ju-an, but not become a murderer. His reason is that Ha Ju-an wanted to kill the reporter and also wanted Lee Yu-byom. And in the process of stopping her, he ends up killing her unintentionally. He plans to claim self-defense and aims to be acquitted. When Han Woo-tak arrives, Lee Yu-byom is carrying Hong Joo downstairs. Soon, Lee Yu-byom falls into a coma. Jae Chan arrives and meets Han Woo-tak, who tells him she can't breathe due to paralysis in her lungs and instructs medical staff to bring a respirator. In the meantime, He gives Hong Joo artificial respiration, just like Hong Joo saved him 13 years ago. When Lee Byum wakes up, he is interrogated by the police. He sticks to his premeditated story, claiming that Ha Juan fell to her death. Ha Juan confesses she is the real culprit behind the saline bottle serial murders. She came to seek his advice and mistook Nam Hong Joo for someone who would inform the media. So Ha Juan decided to drug and kill them. Though he was weak and barely conscious, he wanted to stop her from killing and followed her to the rooftop with difficulty. Ha Juan had already injected the reporter with the drug. Though he wanted to stop her, his body wouldn't cooperate. During a struggle, he pushed her unintentionally, and then she fell. When he learns that Nam Hong Joo is fine, Lee Byum is completely devastated. If it were a minute later, Hong Joo would have died. Fortunately, Jae Chan's artificial respiration saved her, but it's uncertain when she will wake up due to severe brain hypoxia. Mom firmly believes that Hong Joo will wake up. Upon learning that Lee Byum will claim self-defense, Jae Chan is so angry that he storms to the emergency room to confront him. Seeing the department head approaching, Jae Chan cries out, asking how he could just leave suddenly, especially at such a time. The department head admits that he is the uncle who was once a deserter brother, and he resigned because he could no longer assist in crimes like he did before. The protagonist now confronting Lee Byum is acting impulsively, and in the end, there is nothing he can do about him. The department head analyzes that if Jae Chan goes now and beats up lawyer Lee, he will only be dismissed from the investigation and trial. It's better to hold back now and punish him later through investigation and trial. The uncle dreamed that Jae Chan would cause trouble here with Lee Byum and then get kicked out, unable to do anything. The arson case will be dismissed without charges due to Ha Juan's death, and the saline bottle murder case will also be dismissed without charges because of Ha Juan's death. Lee Byum also pins the forgery of evidence on Ha Juan. The medicine bottles found in Myung Hospital's office could be accessed by Ha Juan, which makes sense. Myung Daegu questions why it is so simple now, when it was so difficult before, and why Lee Byum didn't think of these things earlier. Lee Byum kneels down on the spot and apologizes. It is said that Ko Sung-ho will personally defend Lee Byum. Ko Sung-ho is a lawyer who can refute detention orders even in murder cases, and he is a top-tier lawyer with an annual salary of 10 billion. Hong Joo has heard all of this. She thanks Jae Chan for helping her get rid of the nightmare she had for a long time. Hong Joo had many dreams about Jae Chan while she was asleep, so she roughly knows how the case is proceeding and what nonsense Lee Byum has said. And the department head is that police uncle. Ko Sung-ho asks Lee Byum to arrange a meal with reporter Nam, thinking she is on Lee Byum's side. Lee Byum falsely claims Nam Hong Joo might misunderstand him. Ko Sung-ho asks him to explain exactly what the misunderstanding is, as he does not want to be embarrassed in the upcoming trial. Ko Sung-ho is not interested in what kind of person Lee Byum is. Whether he kills intentionally or unintentionally doesn't matter to him. Ko Sung-ho just doesn't want the law firm to get dirty. Only honest confessions can help him clean up and cover up the past. Hong Joo is discharged, and Jung Jae Chan specifically requests that Han Woo-tak and others be responsible for protecting Nam Hong Joo's safety, to prevent Lee Byum from causing harm. Han Woo-tak dreams about the situation in court, knowing he will mess everything up and not knowing what to do. Lee Byum suggests to Jung Jae Chan that if he thinks in a direction that makes sense, he will find an answer. A lawyer and a serial killer conspiring to murder a reporter, and a serial killer murdering a lawyer and a reporter. Which one makes more sense? Curious about whose words the judge will believe. Whether the defendant forged evidence or not is the focus of this case. The inventory list at the end has 3 bottles of vecuronium, which is exactly what the murderer Ha Juan injected into the IV fluids, killing 11 patients. The department head also believes these 3 bottles of vecuronium are forged evidence. This crucial evidence is recorded in different handwriting on the last line. The department head explains that they initially drafted the inventory at the scene, and when they returned to the office to confirm it again, they added the omitted items, hence the different handwriting. Ko Sung-ho questions the department head who searched and seized the items and also filled out the inventory list, asking who is the most likely suspect to have forged evidence. Unexpectedly, they despicably framed the department head. Things are looking grim. Jung Jae Chan asks, who were there to confirm the seized items at the time? Apart from 2 department heads, there was also the prosecutor, Lee Byum. These three were the only ones who could access the seized items, and thus are also the three suspects who might have forged evidence. Moreover, Lee Yoo-byum received the Prosecutor General's award because of this, and after receiving the award, he was poached by the Haegwang law firm. The department heads received no commendation. In other words, who benefited from the forgery? The main beneficiary of the forgery is Lee Yoo-byum. Next, it's Nam Hong Joo's turn. The major point of contention is how witness Nam Hong Joo got to the rooftop. Lee Yoo-byum claims Ha Ju-an carried her up, while Hong Joo asserts that Lee Yoo-byum carried her up. She distinctly remembers seeing both carrying umbrellas when she collapsed on the rooftop. If Ha Ju-an had carried her, she wouldn't have been able to hold an umbrella. Lee Yoo-byum, suffering from a drug reaction, wouldn't have thought to bring two umbrellas upstairs. If the umbrella factor makes sense due to Lee Yoo-byum's drug reaction, the drug must have been consumed by Lee Yoo-byum after killing Ha Ju-an to claim self-defense. Ha Ju-an bringing two umbrellas implies she intended to return with Lee Yoo-byum. If she planned to return alone, she would have brought only one umbrella. This means Lee Yoo-byum pushed Ha Ju-an, who had no intent to kill, off the roof, leading to her death, not self-defense, but murder. However, Ko Sung-ho asks her to read the part about the medicine's side effects, which can cause various abnormal thoughts. Apparently, after taking the medication, one might experience hallucinations, auditory hallucinations, and depersonalization. Ko Sung-ho quickly dismisses Nam Hong Joo's statement as nonsensical. Hong Joo is clear. Lee Yoo-byum carried her to the rooftop, opened an umbrella, and helped Ha Ju-an attempt to kill her. Ko Sung-ho argues that these memories are also post-medication. Jung Jae Chan counters that Lee Yoo-byum also claimed to have taken the medicine. If this drug is used to invalidate a witness's testimony, then all of Lee Yoo-byum's assertions should also be dismissed, including his attempt to save Nam Hong Joo, his claim that Ha Ju-an attacked him forcing him to push her away, and his claim of self-defense. These could also be hallucinations and auditory hallucinations. Thus, they are at a deadlock. Now, Han Woo-tak becomes key. Though they have obtained evidence of two umbrellas with fingerprints of Lee Yoo-byum and Ha Ju-an, the umbrellas were not found on the rooftop but in the courtyard on the first floor. Due to strong winds that day, Hong Joo guesses Han Woo-tak does not know the color of the umbrellas. If he cannot answer, his color blindness will be exposed and he can no longer be a policeman. So she tells him to remember. The long umbrella is green and the folding umbrella is red. Han Woo-tak is surprised how Nam Hong Joo knows this, but decides to let it go as Hong Joo advises Han Woo-tak to leave to avoid Ko Sung-ho's detailed questioning. She knows Han Woo-tak would hate to give up being a policeman. Now that no one is around, it's best for him to leave quickly. Han Woo-tak is touched by Hong Joo's consideration for him. He won't run away and will not make a mistake. The department head reminds Jung Jae Chan to apply for a travel ban on Lee Yoo-byum because he saw a suitcase in the back of his car. He might flee abroad immediately. This will be handled by a colleague. Han Woo-tak describes the scene at that time. Jung Jae Chan asks the witness to identify which type of umbrellas they were, and when asked about the color of the umbrellas, Han Woo-tak straightforwardly admitted that he could not distinguish colors accurately. Ko Sung-ho confidently thought the game was over. Han Woo-tak planned to submit his resignation after finishing his testimony. Ko Sung-ho believed that it was difficult for even a normal person to remember the colors of umbrellas on a dark, rainy night, let alone a witness with color weakness. However, Han Woo-tak stated that he had a better ability to discern light and darkness than ordinary people, so he could see more clearly at night. Han Woo-tak clearly described the characteristics of the two umbrellas and recognized that the long umbrella was the same color as Lee Yoo-byum's tie, and the folding umbrella was a more vivid color than the front of Jung Jae Chan's robe. He accurately identified that the umbrellas in the photos were the same as those he witnessed. Ko Sung-ho also gave up on further court appearances, suggesting that Lee Yoo-byum better plead for a lighter sentence next time. Han Woo-tak never felt that the badge on his chest was truly his. The weight of the badge was so heavy that it was painful. He was happy because he had borne that weight and felt he could not be greedy anymore. Lee Yoo-byum also planned to flee overseas, but the application to prohibit him from leaving the country was approved. Lee Yoo-byum was passionate when investigating the IV murder case, not because he wanted an award, but because he firmly believed that Mr. Ming was the murderer. He could not accept being backstabbed like this by his director, since Lee Yoo-byum was like a brother to the director. The director could not bear to see him make one mistake after another. A frenzied Lee Yoo-byum drove his car straight at the director. Lee Yoo-byum was taken away on the spot. The director had once dreamed of this moment, where in his dream, Jung Jae Chan had said, "If you have ever dreamed of this moment, please, do not come to see me. If you do not come to see me, you can survive." Jung Jae Chan felt very regretful and self-blaming, as he had failed to recognize the police uncle who had been by his side for so long. The uncle had already known the outcome before coming to him, and asked Jung Jae Chan not to blame himself, since it was the uncle's own choice. Lee Yoo-byum confessed to all his crimes and was ultimately sentenced to life imprisonment. Nam Hong Joo planned to give her book to Han Woo-tak, as Han Woo-tak was going to law school, just like in her dream. Knowing that Hong Joo had dreamed of him attending law school a year later, Han Woo-tak also became fully confident and planned to become a lawyer, thinking that perhaps rescue through law was more suitable for him than trial. Have you ever wished you had the ability to foresee the future?